So we are back for another video, and this one will be more of a case study type video, which we kind of think is modern day illness in modern day's lifestyle, because we see this a lot with a lot of people we work with, and predominantly it's something that's fixable, and most of the time people are already aware of this. But they probably focus on strategies that I wouldn't class as the most effective, because they're not fixing the issue, they are fixing the symptom. So, and that would be insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, things like that, which is very prevalent. And maybe take it away and start breaking down what can people expect from doing their blood test to see if they have this kind of issue already, and maybe some other things that kind of help.
Another thing that I will add that kind of always, or at least I see, is diabetes, type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, sometimes combined with hypothyroidism, because this will add to that. They kind of work in step with each other, but yes. But
so if you can break it down, how do people even get there, and how can they kind of acknowledge that doing the basics we already discussed, which is blood test, should be always number one?
Yeah. So like you stated at the beginning, this is a modern day problem from modern day lifestyles. What we're doing right now is a perfect example. We're indoors, we're in front of a computer. And what that means is that our body is receiving the wrong type of light information all the time. There's nothing necessarily wrong with being indoors or shining blue lights from LED screens or your phones into your eye just semi-regularly. It's what happens with people that predominantly have an indoor work schedule, an indoor lifestyle that involves being in front of screens. Now, the way you're going to find this on blood work, right, is very easy. We talked about this earlier, but this episode is going to dive deep onto how it happens and how to correct it. But the blood work will initially come back as, we'll talk about the diabetic side of things. 3 markers are very important. Your glucose, everybody kind of always gets that tested, but that needs to be paired. Fasted glucose needs to be paired with fasted insulin. And then the third one there is your A1C. This is common to be tested all the time, and except for the fasted insulin. That's not normally always ordered, just the first 2. But the fasted insulin paired with a fasted glucose tells me a lot, because it tells me how much insulin is being required to be secreted by your body to regulate that fasted insulin or the fasted glucose. If your fasted insulin is a 6 or above, and your fasted glucose is, and I'm talking American terms right now, and your fasted glucose is somewhere around high 90s, that starts to tell me that you're at the cusp, the starting point of insulin resistance, because normally your fasted insulin should be like a 4 or a 3. It should be below 5. And have a blood sugar of low 90s. That would be like my minimum. Now, most people will be beyond that. They'll be like, oh, my blood sugar is 99 or 100, and their insulin is like a 10 or an 11. And that immediately goes, okay, this is the start of, this is pre-diabetes. Now, doctors won't classify you as pre-diabetes until your A1C gets to 5.6. That's too late, because your A1C is a lagging indicator instead of a leading indicator. So by the time your A1C gets to 5.6 or higher, your insulin has been really high for a long time, and your blood sugar has already been high 90s or 100 or 101 for a long time, at least half a year or more. So I use the insulin and blood sugar combination of fasted first, because those are leading indicators instead of lagging indicators.
So going through this, what kind of issues actually this kind of put on your body? So let's
what's expected? Yeah, so most people then go, okay, well, it's what am I eating? Like I got to change my food, right? Like that's what happens when you get this. And the doctor goes, oh, well, you need to exercise more and you need to eat better. And that's about all they do, and until you get to the
But I'm thinking
5.6.
more along the lines is how will they feel with these kind of blood tests, blood test
Oh yeah,
results?
they won't feel very good. They'll for sure. Well, it will be two different types of symptoms. So the feel will be lethargy. It will be unmotivation to kind of like exert yourself. Basically, think of it like you've ate Thanksgiving dinner all the time, right?
Yeah,
You're just kind of like,
24/7.
yeah, you're just kind of like, I just don't feel like I want to do anything. I just kind of need to sit here, and that's your blood sugar being and your insulin being too high to cope with.
Yeah, and
And
usually
then,
this kind of makes you think, oh, I just need to rest a bit more.
yeah,
You're like,
and then the next symptom will be the inability to lose fat very easily. Because if you think about it, if your insulin is high, that is blunting fat metabolism. Like we know that, right? Catabolism gets blunted by insulin. And if your insulin is higher than it should be, you're going to have a hard time catabolizing anything, including body fat. So these are the type of people that are like, I've tried every diet in the world and just can't lose body fat very well. In fact, another key indicator that's not blood work related is a DEXA scan. If you go on a program, a weight training program, a new diet or whatever, and your DEXA, like I've seen this happen, they lose body weight, but they lose muscle only and their body fat stays the same. Or they go to gain muscle and they gain weight, but they only gain body fat and they don't gain any muscle. That's another telltale sign of insulin resistance, prediabetes, is you're literally storing only body fat and trying to maintain body fat stores, and you're not losing any of them. So that's another little tell there. Another thing that I see, this is not a test, like as far as like, go pay money. This is just the test is once you're in that pre-diabetic stage, you have a hard time tanning. You have a hard time catching a tan. You tend to burn more easily. But most people already know that. By the time they find out that they can't tan very well and they burn really easy and they're always pasty white, they already know that they have diabetes, prediabetes. A doctor's already diagnosed it. And then now, what's the cause then, right? So if it's not what you're eating, right? If it's not, they change their diet, they start exercising, it doesn't really improve, nothing really helps. They start taking drugs, like all kinds of medications that the doctor's prescribing them, and it kind of seems to help, but then it comes back and they're like, I don't know what's going on. That is a telltale sign that it's your environmental exposure that's driving super physiological levels of insulin and blood sugar all the time. What causes that? Blue light from all your LED screens and indoor lighting. And more importantly, that light is absent of infrared light and UV light. So in other words, you're indoors, because the only place you're going to get infrared light and UV light is from the sun. We'll talk a little bit about some workarounds, right? Like when we get to like actually fixing this at the root cause. But that's how that works, right? You're indoors, you're getting blue light through your eye all the time. Now, for people that are a little bit more science-based or just want to know the mechanism, the way that happens is there's a hormone called POMC, pro-opiomelanocortin. We talked about that in our previous episode. POMC is dovetailed with melanin, right? We talked about the tanning and everything last time, but POMC also gets sliced as it goes into the brain. It gets sliced into the things that cause for melanin production, but it also gets sliced into something called ACTH. ACTH stands for adrenal corticotropin hormone. What that does is it basically allows your body to release blood sugar, okay? And the other thing that POMC gets sliced into is something called CLIP. CLIP is corticotropin-like immediate peptide. The first one, ACTH, causes blood sugar to rise. The second one, CLIP, causes insulin to rise, just by the introduction of blue light, as long as it's absent of infrared and UV. And it doesn't have to be completely absent. It just has to be lower than normal.
Yeah, so if you're used to working from home over the last few years and not changed your habits one bit.
Yeah, Yeah, exactly. So if you don't change anything, you're going to gain weight. So let's, and this has happened right over the last 3 years with like working from home and the whole virus thing and all of that. This is what I've seen. Previously healthy people all of a sudden are getting fat and having metabolic issues with dysregulation of insulin. And that's literally
not even with eating more or anything. It's just because
no, they literally don't have to eat more. Yeah, if you truly understand what I just said, you're literally feeding yourself just by being it with blue light in your eyes, because your brain as evolutionary, remember, like last episode, we talked about how we're mammals and we were meant to have melanin on the outside, but we sucked it in, etc. Well, another evolutionary adaptation from mammals is that we survived the dark age of the asteroid hitting the planet and the dinosaurs died because IR light and UV light went down, but blue light remained. So we developed a system to feed ourselves without plants. And that system is this POMC, ACTH, and CLIP pathway. These three things work together to cause us to feed ourselves with blood sugar without having food in our mouth. We're initiating that pathway when we live an indoor life. So now think about that. We're not starving, right? We actually have food. We're feeding ourselves and we're living indoors. You're bound to raise your blood sugar way beyond where it's capable of, right? Like that's what I'm getting at. This pathway is not bad. It's just that we don't understand that we're feeding ourselves already without even putting food in our mouth, and then we feed ourselves some more.
It's very similar to, like we've talked about it before, is that when you read a blood test and you don't know the person, it's very hard to read a blood test without actually talking to the person first. You know, you've seen my blood test. Someone with my blood test would probably be suicidal, depressed, and all sorts. Whereas for me, that's just the lifestyle I'm living, and I feel extremely good at that. You know, so this is very similar. Somebody might look into this and, hey, let's prescribe you a lot of drugs, supplements, and whatnot. But in reality, what it shows is just shows what you are already doing. It doesn't necessarily mean there is something wrong with you. It just shows exactly what you're doing to your body.
Yes. So going back to, you know, there's more science to that, way more. I don't think people need to really dive that much deeper into that. They're probably already going to Google those three things and try to figure, you know, try to understand it. But so then what do you do about it, right? So if it's not the food, right? Like, because some people will be like, well, I'll just stop eating. That's technically, depending on your lifestyle, a choice, right? Like, hey, while you're at work, and so maybe it's like, hey, you know what? I live somewhere where I have like 3 hours before work where I can spend a lot of time outside, and a whole bunch of hours, like 5 hours after work, that I can spend a lot of time outside. So in the middle of the day when I'm inside, I don't eat. And that is actually a logical thing. So instead of intermittent fasting hey, I don't eat until 2 p.m., I implement a midday intermittent fasting where this person doesn't fast while they're indoors. A perfect example is I work with a pharmacist, where everybody kind of knows when you go into a pharmacy, it's really brightly lit. Like everything is lit up, screens everywhere, and she's having problems with all this stuff. And I go, okay, well, you know, what time is your fun? She's like, I only go in from 9 till 4 p.m. And she lives closer to the equator. And so I'm like, okay, well, from whenever you wake up till 9, I want you to be outside as much as possible to counteract. Remember, because what I said is the only time this actually happens to any major degree is when you're lacking infrared and UV. So she spends most of her time outside. And again, she lives somewhere she can do this year round. And most of her time outside in the evening. And in the middle of the day, when she's at the pharmacy, she doesn't eat because she's getting fed already through her eyes. Okay. Now, the reason for that is she works at a pharmacy. She can't have some of the other things that I'm going to recommend for, say, somebody who works in an office, right? Like you run your own office or you have your own room at a building or whatever. Then at that point, then you can implement some different strategies. Right off the bat, the one thing that I say is if you have a lot of windows, open all the windows, right? So that you're getting infrared light coming in and UV light coming in. If that's not an option, then we can go with synthetic versions of light. They're not the best because, well, if you pay the money, they can be excellent, because there's a lot of bad products out there when it comes to infrared lighting. Infrared lighting, you want to pay the big bucks. You want to pay, a brand that I like is called EMR Tech. And that brand has very strong lights. You want the strongest they can buy, and they measure them in microwatts per meter squared. You want something that's 200 and above.
So when you're talking about open windows, it's not just opening blinds, it's actually open the window.
The glass, yes, you're right. Yes, 100%. Yes, because glass is made to block UV light. It blocks 100% UV light, and it blocks 70% infrared. So you need to open the glass, correct?
Yeah, because I think that distinction needs to be made, as a lot of people will just think, I'll just
yeah.
I got a lot of windows.
I'm glad you said that. Yeah, no, it needs to be a physically open window with no glass. Because
what about using something like blue light blockers in the middle of the day?
Yes. So the pharmacy example, she couldn't get away with using the red ones, like the ones that block 100% blue light, but she could get away with using the tinted ones that block 60%. Any amount that you can block is beneficial when you're going to be inside. And then for somebody who works in their own office, or, that it doesn't matter that what color of lens they wear, I do promote a 100% blue blocking lens, so that they stop causing blood sugar and insulin to go up while they're indoors. And kind of going back to what I just started, if you can pair that with a good high quality infrared light, you're going to pay about $1,000 for one of these. Like, you're not going to get them for cheap. And that's going to be a small thing about the size of a laptop. They sell big ones that are about $9,000 that are the size of your body. Those
I've seen some of my clients, they usually put it on a wall.
Yeah.
Like home gym and stuff.
Yeah. So I would start and that's exactly what they'll do. They'll put it in a home gym. I'm like, no, put that in your office. That's where it matters. That's where you're going to start. That's where you spend most of your day. So that's where you want that. Wherever you're spending most of your indoor life is where you want that, and you want that on the whole time you're indoors. And then you want to pair that with UVA light. So that's a black light, and you want to pair that with a good quality black light as well. That's about the best you're going to be able to do when it comes to synthetically trying to recreate what's outside.
So I'm coming to conclusions that probably a good idea would be just telling them, hey, can you go out for 10-15-minute walk every couple hours as well?
Yeah. Extremely beneficial. And it's something that I do with my clients is I literally, if they have the means, right? If they have the means, there is, and again, this is before you're really bad diabetic, before you have 5 different drugs that you're taking and all kinds of things. This is like the start. Then I go, okay, the very first thing we need to do is, do you have the means to construct like a balcony room that's screened so that there's no glass that you can work from, right? Make an outdoor office space. Just doing that will solve 90% of the issue if you're just barely pre-diabetic. Now, if you have lots of prescriptions and stuff like that, you need stronger sun. And that's where, if you have the means, like this case study that we've talked about, then you do the same thing, but you relocate to somewhere where there's strong sun so that you can counteract as fast as possible the damage that you've been doing for the last 5 to 10 years, because that's
so you're saying that would it be plausible for somebody to, let's say, move to Mexico for 3 months and fix their health much quicker than relying on drugs and God knows what else?
Absolutely, but they got to commit to the outside. Just going to Mexico, but you still go inside.
Office, yeah.
that don't work, right? Like, you still have to commit to hey, I still have to have an outdoor space to live from, but my outdoor space in Mexico is way drastically going to speed up the recovery process versus an outdoor space in Minnesota, right? Like, or Canada, right? Like, those are 2 different environments. Even though they're both outside, one will expedite the process much quicker because the UV light and IR light that you're going to receive is going to be incredibly stronger.
So talk about more about this specific case. Let's say someone does move to Mexico and they have had all these kind of issues with their health, always feeling tired, uh, like brain fog and whatnot. But they can go to they work from office. They don't really need to be in any place. They can go to Mexico for 2-3 months. What would be the order of sequence of events they need to implement to get their health to as good stage as possible, as quickly as possible? Would there be something different than what they
it would be a little bit more intense in regards to, because case study is you're on a bunch of drugs already, things are going downhill, it's not getting better, and now it's getting to the point where not only are you going to be taking 3 or 4 drugs, you're also going to have to start taking insulin because your blood sugar is so out of control. So yes, then at that point, there will be a specific way to try to fix this, to get you off of all the drugs and all of that. And that specific way would be ways because, the reason for going to Mexico or something closer to the equator and living, an outdoor office space type of thing is because we want stronger sunlight. There are ways to amplify the sunlight even stronger, just using nature and maybe a little bit of hacks, which is water. Water amplifies sunlight because water is a red light chromophore. That means that it collects red light. That's why the ocean around the Caribbean is the temperature that it is all the time, even though the sun goes away all the time. It's because it collects red light and saves it. So what that means is if every morning or, starting mid-morning, you can go out and spend as much time, not necessarily swimming, but like soaking in some water. Any skin that's touching the water is now absorbing more red light than if you were just standing out dry. So literally wake up, go to the beach. Actually go to the beach, sit in the water, chill out for as long as you can. Minimum about 15 to 30 minutes of just kind of waiting in the water is good enough. And eventually, you'll get to the point where you can wait in there longer if you want or whatnot, but you can come back and forth. So you can just have like a cabana, right? Like, again, people with means can do this. You work from a cabana and you go back to your shade, you do your work with your computer, your phone calls, whatever. And then in between all of that, instead of pacing around in an office or like talking on the phone in your office building, just take a little break and go out into the water and chill out in the beach water. That will help you collect and intensify more IR light and more UV light because your skin is made from the same, and we talked about this in the previous episode, your skin is made from the same substance, the same ectoderm that your brain is. It functions like your third eye for interpreting environmental signals. So it starts to undo processes at the brain level with this ACTH and CLIP hormones by accelerating how much red light you can get exposed to on the skin. Coincidentally, that will raise your ability to tan, right? So the more you can tan, it's a sign, like checking on your progress. It doesn't have to be a blood work when you're doing this. If you can all of a sudden start tanning well, that means that your skin is now absorbing way more red light because red light conditions your skin to tan when it's exposed to UV light. So that is a quick diagnostic that doesn't require any real thought process. Am I tanning or not? If you are, you're doing it well and you're doing it enough. If you're not tanning quite very well and you're still burning, it means you need to do it more often or more length of time.
So physiologically, what would you see on blood tests as well? So that would be dropping down insulin, glucose.
Yes. So again, I would use the leading indicators, correct? So leading indicators will also be the thing. So their A1C might not move very much, but the first thing that will start to move, and I've seen this multiple times, is their fasted insulin. Their blood sugar might still stay in, 99 or 100, but the very first thing, like within 4 weeks of doing a protocol like this, you test their fasted insulin, and normally it's been like a 8, a 9, or a 10, and you'll see it drop down below 5. It'll be like a 4 or a 3, and that's green light number 1. You keep doing it for another couple of weeks, then the blood sugar will follow and it will drop down under 100 down to the low 90s. And then by nature, you maintain that for 90 to 100 days, and all of a sudden your A1C is dropping dramatically because it's a lagging indicator.
Yeah, it's usually like 3 months observation when that comes in play.
Yeah.
I bet a lot of people will go on the beach now and think, oh, guys, this one is really brown. He must have really good insulin sensitivity.
Well, I'm not joking. I can pretty much, just by looking at how people tan and with, again, let's back up a little bit. How do you think that you're doing the correct thing, but you're in fact not using sunscreen? Sunscreen will prevent you from initiating these processes. So somebody who tans well by default is not using sunscreen. So I can almost guarantee that they do have good insulin sensitivity. So
yeah, that was something when I went to Bahamas and spent a week there, and then people, why don't you use sunscreen? And I'm like, I really don't need to. I just don't burn. And then on the last day, somebody put sunscreen on me, and my skin just was not having it, was not liking it at all.
yeah,
I had never used sunscreen before, ever.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. So it's not good enough to do the action because there are things in modern recommendations that are preventing the fix. Sunglasses are another one. So you got to treat this with somebody who's got these problems. They almost always use sunglasses. They almost always use sunscreen whenever they're out. And you have to teach them kind of dial that back. Yeah. And teach them to start early in the day, because you cannot, even if you don't have sunscreen and don't wear glasses, early day sunlight does not burn you. And that's where that's why I harp, and we've always harped, morning sunlight is crucial, because it starts to condition the right outcomes for later in the day so that you don't burn.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that none of us are saying just go out there and burn as long as you can. No, it needs to be
exactly right.
A progressive overload, as if you're doing with your training, with your food, with everything else. You know, even if it's 5-10 minutes, just no sunscreens, no nothing, just see how your skin reacts to it, and then go from there. What I would like to know about is the medicine that usually is prescribed to people like that, which is your metformin. Usually people are prescribed semaglutide now as well, which is like appetite suppressant, because it's easy for us to say, hey, don't eat middle of the day. Yeah, we can do that because we are mentally we're not eating for pleasure. We're eating for purpose. So for us, we can just flip that switch. How about people who haven't worked up to that yet? What actually happens with these kind of things, and what can be done about it? Is there anything that can be done at all?
Well, let's put it this way. They just give you a bigger window to continue to live the same lifestyle without getting the problem. It does not fix the problem, right? That's the issue with these. They allow you a cushion of more time to continue to do the things that are causing the problem. That's the only thing that they're doing.
Yeah, the way I describe it is they treat a symptoms. They don't treat the cause.
Yeah. So all they're doing is suppressing the symptom. The cause is still escalating. So then eventually what ends up happening is you need more drugs, because this starts to catch up. So you need more and more drugs. And it gets to the point where now you just need insulin, because your pancreas has been cranking out so much insulin for so long, it starts to give up. And now even the drugs that suppress or help suppress blood sugar are no longer enough. And now you need actual exogenous insulin.
And then, this is interesting thing you talk about insulin. This is what happens really down the line when this has been an issue for a long time, doesn't it?
Yes, and that's why I said, this case study of like, hey, we need you to relocate, we need you to live an outdoor style, and we need to amplify it by going out in the ocean. That's for somebody who's been on drugs for a while now, because if you understand correctly, the fact that you're on multiple drugs tells me that this scenario of your cause continuing to cause problems has only escalated, and the drugs at first suppressed it enough that you didn't notice. Then you took more drugs because this climbed back up. So now instead of just being a small peak of a problem, it's a very large mountain of problem.
Yeah, so my go-to is usually go outside and do some journaling in the morning, because of so people like this will not have a lot of energy to go for a long walk or anything.
Yes, and that's exactly what I recommend. I with somebody like this, that's why I say the beach is like, obviously we're relocating you, we're trying to get you to be outside. And then they go, well, do I got to go work out? I'm like, no, I want you to just sit on the beach. I just literally just sit on the beach, listen to some music on your iPod or whatever, and then, or journal. I don't care that you're not working out. The fact, because that's not what we're trying to change. What we're trying to change is the baseline mechanism at the biological level that's been chronically entering your eye. We want to undo that process. So really all I need you to do is be out in strong sunlight and try to amplify that process as much as possible.
Yeah. I usually see immediate results within a week. Like people go like, wow, I feel so much better now. And I didn't really change anything. Like, well, you didn't change everything about your lifestyle. You just don't do anything that you thought you need to do, like eating in severe calorie deficit, doing hours and hours on the treadmill and this and that, because all of that comes into play once your daily baselines habits are in good place.
Once your health starts to improve, now you are motivated to do things like change your body, exercise more, lift weights, etc. Trying to get somebody who can't do those things and has these issues is a losing battle. It really is. Like, you got to meet them where they're at. And the simplest thing is start changing the root cause, because it doesn't take physical exercising to do that. And it doesn't take starving them to death to do that. It takes changing their environment, right? Go back to the previous 2 episodes. The environment matters so much.
So when you talk about these physiological changes, I've noticed in type 1 diabetes, there will be some kind of iron things as well. Is this something that can happen with these type of people when it's
Yes.
does it happen straight away or maybe some later down the line? And what does it actually mean in terms of how they would feel?
So something that people might not really understand is that red light influences ATPase, which is making energy. Okay. And to form more ATP, you need more oxygen. When you're lacking infrared light, that means that you're not making as much ATP, which is why these people feel sluggish. Okay. What that also means is that you're not transporting a lot of oxygen either. So what does your body think? It thinks that you're hypoxic. In other words, you have very little oxygen, because it's trying to increase your energy output, but it doesn't understand why it's not happening. So its only choice is to increase oxygen carrying capacity. And everybody kind of knows that if you increase iron, you'll increase hemoglobin, you'll increase the blood's ability to carry oxygen. That was really quick, right? Like, I just said that all in those steps. But that's exactly why you will see high iron, high ferritin, especially if you're a man and you are at the starting point of early stage prediabetes, is because your body thinks you're hypoxic because you're not making enough energy, because you're not exposing yourself to infrared light. And then your body reacts in default to that by going, oh, we just need more oxygen because we need more energy. So it raises iron, raises ferritin to try to make more hemoglobin.
Yeah, and somewhere along the line, it's going to get depleted as well. So you kind of
need that can't last forever, just like the pancreas can't keep up forever.
And that's the big distinctions that people need to understand, that when you are doing your blood test, someone who reads your blood test might not be aware how important it is to understand your lifestyle to give you a good assessment on what those results actually show. Because more often than not, what we see is just take more drugs. And you're like, it can't be an answer to everything. It just can't.
It isn't the answer by default, because your symptoms get worse, you get another drug. They get worse, you get another drug. By default, you got to understand that it's not getting there.
Yeah. And our purpose is always get you off everything, because it's like we name series Becoming Superhuman because standard of physical health is so low now that anyone can become superhuman by just going outside and drinking more water, eating more whole foods instead of these whatever fake meats and God knows what else. So it's just crazy.
Yes, you're 100% right. Being superhuman in this modern era is you're not on drugs and you're healthy enough to execute normal human tasks. Now, once you get to that point, some of these things that we've told you can really bring you to superhuman status.
Yeah.
But just baseline human activity at the current moment is so low, the standard is abysmal, that getting you to normal will appear to be superhuman for most people.
Yeah, and that's why you see people who live in like a wilderness and whatnot, they are usually perceived as extremely powerful and whatnot, but it's just because their lifestyle is like that. Just a couple of days ago, I was watching this, there was this video of two Russians wrestling a bear, and I'm like, who on earth does that? And they literally tried to take him down, and that bear is just playing with it. Obviously, he's been raised up since he was it's not an unusual thing in Russia to do, but you won't be able to do that if you live in downtown New York and never seen a daylight.
Oh, you won't. You'll get hurt walking upstairs. You'll get hurt picking up your kid. You'll get hurt riding your bike, right? Like you become fragile is what happens when you don't get outside.
Yeah, and even more so, all these kind of things can titrate down to your reproductive system and everything else, and that's not funny road to be on.
Oh, it's not. No, it's not.
No, awesome.
So, yeah,
I think this is really useful, unless you want to add anything else.
No, I think that's there's a lot more there. This, going more in depth now becomes more personal for that person, just like you keep reiterating. There's a lot more that can be done to these things because there's the hypothyroidism. And in fact, maybe that's what should be our next topic is how does all of this lead to hypothyroidism as well as the diabetes? And because that's another epidemic.
No, absolutely. Well, David, thanks for your time as usual, and we'll dive deeper on this in next video.
Thank you.